So first, let's review our tools of the trade. You're going to need a 4-inch rain gauge that I know that you all have. And what's the first thing we do when we're expecting snow? Take this out, yes. So, and for those of you that have automated sensors, I know somebody mentioned that their Davis is always off a little bit. It's important to use the Coco Ross rain gauge because it is the most accurate. We find with our Davis weather sensor, the harder it rains, the bigger the error is. So the more precipitation we're not measuring.
All of them measure snow? Like of our one that...
Well, that's the other thing. That's the other thing is that an automated sensor, unless you have something, what we had in the Air Force, it will have a heater that will melt the precipitation, the snow. But pretty much anything that you get off the shelf isn't going to have that capability.
Here, let me add one thing. If by some chance we don't get the snow and it rains, it's not that big of a deal that this thing is out. So when in doubt, take this out. Because you can still, it rains in here, you still dump it in here, and you still got a pretty accurate measurement. So when in doubt, just go ahead and take it out.
So the other tool of your trade is your snowboard. It is painted white because otherwise, if it was a black surface, then the sun is going to melt it. So this has a lower albedo. Your other tool of the trade is for snow depth measurements. That's your yardstick or something similar. A brush for after you take your snowfall measurement on the snowboard, then you can get rid of the snow. So we already talked about the rain gauge there. Other things to go with the snowboard is a marker of some sort, okay? Because you imagine if you've had a foot of snow overnight and it's a little windy and you go out in the morning. So you're out there now with the marker poking
stab,
around.
stab, stab, stab. Oh, I think that's it.
I've done it a lot. Yes. So, you know, a nice tall marker. When we are up on Piedra there, we're in Wildflower, just past the 2 cattle grades. And so we will always have a good 2 feet of snow well into March. In December of last year, we had over 3 feet.
Yeah, we were right about 3 feet.
Yeah, so quite a bit of snow. So yeah, just put the marker next to the snowboard. We tried to think of ways maybe to have a marker on the snowboard that's attached to it. But then sometimes the easiest thing to do is you take that snowfall measurement and then you flip the board.
And that's going to lay on top of the snow then. So as the snow piles up, oh, sorry.
These are tools of the trade.
Oh, whoopsie.
So for doing snow core measurements that I did not do last year, this is optional. So if you want to do a snow core measurement, we'll go into how to do that. But you're using a spatula because you're going to thunk your rain gauge down into the snow and then put your spatula under there so that it holds a whole tube of snow. So that's another.
What do you do that in?
Oh, we'll get to
later,
that.
okay.
We'll get to that.
Do that on your snowboard? On your
This,
He's gonna
snowboard?
tell us later.
yeah, I'm gonna tell you. We're gonna melt it. So, I use my Tupperware 8-cup container a lot. And this is something for you, Dana. And so you're rushing around in the morning, and this thing is really full, and the guideline, we're going to go through that, you add a little bit of warm water. Well, if this is full of snow and you add even boiling water, it's not going to melt it. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go grab this, and especially if it's still snowing outside. So I have a backup gauge, but for those of you that don't have a backup gauge, you can just take the snow and throw it in your microwavable container, and then you can just let it sit there. You can make a comment in your remarks that your snow depth was X, your snowfall was X, and I will record precipitation later today. Or Andy will record the precipitation. And then you can just set your 8-cup Tupperware container out on the counter, as long as the dog's not gonna drink it. And then later in the day, measure it out and record it then. But yeah, I use this a lot during heavy snow. So those are the tools of the trade. Any questions on tools of the trade?
So I do my snow measurement by weight,
Ah,
so I don't have to melt it, because I kept spilling things.
okay, okay. Yeah, and because this is the way I learned it, I've never actually done it that
I
way.
do
Is
it according,
anybody else?
it's on the Coco Ross website, there's a factor of, was it 201 grams per inch of precipitation in the snow or something?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So I have the mass of the outer cylinder written on the
Mhm.
bottom.
To subtract every
Yeah.
time. Yeah, so if you're interested in doing it that way, the instructions are on the website
are.
there. But I'm not going to get into that today.
You use a digital scale?
Yeah, digital kitchen scale. Just be sure to use grams.
Yeah, and it's pretty accurate.
Seems to be.
Yeah.
You know, I can measure, I mean, I have to measure 3 times. You know, I'll take the average, and, you know, they'll usually be, all 3 measurements will be within a gram, easily within a gram.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're preparing now to measure. So this snowboard, you want to get outside well in advance of the snow coming. You don't want to look outside and say, oh, there's snowflakes, and then run your snowboard from the 80-degree house outside. So find a spot that's well away from buildings, well away from areas that drift. Well, so, I mean, where the snow, like, comes around the side of the house and it piles all up there. You don't want that. You want more out in an open, the most open space you have. You don't want it to be, like, under trees, where then it's losing some of the snowfall. So that's, set the snowboard outside, and then we mark it with the reflector. And then we already discussed, make sure you remove your inner tube. And there are 4 different measurements that you take during the winter with the snow as opposed to during the summer with just the liquid. Yes, Linda?
And do you need it to be on the ground, or can it be on a table or something?
You know, Mike has come up with kind of a unique place where he is putting his snowboard. I've always set it on the ground because that kind of goes back to the training that I had. But if it's easier for you, you know, going out there first thing in the morning on a table where you know that you're not getting any blowing off of the house, or
It's not cooking in the sun when the
it's
sun's
not cooking
out.
in the sun.
But it's
yeah.
also not full shade all winter. You know, that's the tricky part, is it's supposed to be a representative area.
Yeah.
But
So.
in your yard, it would be in the sun, because it wouldn't, like, if you don't have any
That's-
shade, I mean, that's.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
That's a possibility. So, the thing to do is to take that measurement more than just at 8 o'clock in the morning. If we've snowed from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you know that the sun's gonna be coming out, go ahead and take the snowfall measurement then. And if that's the end of the weather, or it might start snowing again in the middle of the night.
That's
then-
exactly what I've done historically.
That's what I do also.
Every time the snow stops, I go out and measure it and just write it down.
Yeah, people don't understand that there's a big difference between snowfall and snow depth.
Yep.
And you can have, and you know, again, this goes back to our training, you could have an inch of liquid equivalent fall out of the sky at 35 degrees and it's heavy wet snowflakes that never stick. That's still snowfall. That counts. You know, even though it's not sticking in the grass or the roads or whatever, that's snowfall. And we in the military, we'd estimate, we'd say 6 inches of snow fell, but melted as it fell. And that's still an official measurement.
What you'd have to, it'd be on the board, is what you're saying, or when you're
Well-
stick or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes it might melt as it fall and you're estimating. Yeah.
So we will get into that too. we'll bring math in.
Don't keep me in suspense. What does Mike do?
What did I spent 20 years in research and development for Harley Davidson in their engine lab. Oh, for that. Oh, that's what I do.
That's also really cool.
Okay,
So it's
so
on the
I've got a bracket,
This is getting
that's
a
gonna go
ball
on my
machine.
tent. We have a second floor deck,
Uh-huh,
and I have a bracket that's gonna go on one of the fence posts.
okay, gotcha.
And then Arleen and Sean were out there, and we kind of decided this would be a representative place that I could put it. It'll enable me to get out there quick, get the measurement. I won't have to mark it as well, because everything's gonna fall off around it, you know? And it should just sit on the board.
I like it.
Yeah, so, and you can always move it again, or if you really want to check and see how it's doing, have a second backup board, and so you have the one that's up on the shelf, and then you can have the one down in the yard, and one morning, when you're feeling up to it, go down and check and see how they're doing. But, you know.
That's what I don't wanna do. I don't
Right,
wanna-
right,
I
yeah,
don't wanna
that's,
go traipsing out through 2.5 feet of snow to find out how much fell on the board.
yeah.
Arlene enjoys that.
Make a patch.
She puts on snowshoes and she
No,
enjoys
no,
it.
no. Yeah.
So we're gonna go over section number 3 here, which is the 4 different snow measurements. We've covered pretty well, I think, the snowfall. So that's taking that measurement of the snow that has fallen in the last 24 hours. And, you know, as we said, you can do that every 2 hours if you'd like, every 6 hours. You know, maybe if you go to work first thing in the morning, take a snowfall measurement then, and maybe you wanna do it in the evening again. It's all up to you, and it depends on what's happening with the weather, as long as you come up with that end amount.
A typical scenario for us, especially early in the season and later in the season, is it will snow overnight, maybe into the morning, and it'll stop 10, noon, and then the sun comes out in the afternoon and it's 35, 36 degrees, and boom, that snow is gone by dinner time. That's a very typical early and late season scenario here.
So you just measure it as many times as you need to throughout the 24-hour period and add it up?
Yes, so that when you take that Coco Ross observation, for whatever your reporting time is, ours 8 o'clock, then it's showing 24 hours for the snowfall. But when you take the actual, that's up to you.
Yeah, what I found is if I don't go out there when the snow actually stops, if I go out there later, it's less.
Yeah.
There's all
So-
kinds of.
It melts off the bottom.
Yeah, so it
And,
settles,
and you dig it up and the bottom is this slush.
Yeah.
absolutely,
So
Like my
Because it's
driveway.
melted down.
yes.
So I mean, is that gonna mess up data if that's what we're doing, or we just put a
No.
note in that says, hey,
Yeah.
I measured at 7 before I went to work, and then.
Absolutely, you can make remarks if you'd like.
Right.
You know, snow stopped at 3 PM, took snowfall measurement at 3:15.
Yeah.
You can make remarks to that if you'd
Yeah, well,
like.
I guess I'm just saying, like, if I measure at 7 before I go to work and it's still snowing, and then I come home in the afternoon and I know it's still been snowing, but there's nothing on the board because it's melted by the time I get home at 5.
So that
Right,
gets
what do
into
I-
another process.
Okay.
And we'll go over
Okay.
that. So what you're gonna do then is estimate the snowfall from the liquid you have
Okay.
based on average temperature. And Dana's gonna help you with that. So,
You back calculate.
I guess that was my question. It's
Yeah.
like,
we'd always love for the temperature to be 15 degrees and for that snow to be consistent and.
And fall
what
straight
is-
from the sky,
Yeah,
fall
what is-
gently in.
What is the biggest evil of taking snowfall measurements?
Wind,
What, I heard it, who said, yes, thank you, Andy, wind. Wind will mess you up every time. So what we're going over at first is the ideal scenario, okay? The snow is falling gently out of the sky, and you're able to
Everything's
go out there and
cold.
take your snowfall measurements, and it's all pretty on the board. And then the wind comes along. So we'll give you some ideas on different things that you can do when the wind has messed you up. So the second measurement that you're taking is your snow depth, which is to the nearest ½ inch. Trick question. So it's been 2 days since you've had any snow. So you have no snowfall, you have no snow water equivalent to measure, but you have 22 inches of snow in the ground. Do you annotate that on your Coco Ross observation?
You just report it. What do you mean annotate?
Well, I mean, that you put it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You report it.
yeah, you
in the
report it.
appropriate field.
Yes. So even if you have not had any precipitation, you have not had any snowfall, if you have snow depth of a ½ inch or more, you have to fill in that field and
Anywhere,
send it.
not necessarily the
But
one
it's,
unit,
but it's
just
gonna
all
go
around the
down
yard.
every day.
Oh, absolutely. And
Absolutely.
that's what's important to agriculture and the hydrologists, and that's exactly what they need
It's
to
just
know.
melting off the bottom.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
That's exactly what they
Yeah.
need to know.
Yeah.
Okay,
But so that's snow depth, and that's pretty straightforward. You just,
at least early in the season, it's melting off the bottom.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and then the wind comes along and, you
Once
know,
the ground freezes, it doesn't do that anymore.
so it's springtime, it gets
Yes.
trickier. So in the springtime then, you've got different areas that are melting, right? Your front yard, sunny all day, the backyard doesn't get any sun. So you're taking a representative number of measurements, okay? You want to avoid areas, again, that are known to be drifting. You want to avoid areas where the snow has fallen off the house and has built up an 8-foot drift. That doesn't count. You want those areas that are somewhat uniform. So in the spring then, when there's no snow left in the front of the house, but you still have snow in the backyard, then you want to take those two measurements, one being 0 and the other being, let's say, 10 inches, and you average those. So your snow depth measurement then is 5 inches. So
that's the
does that
best you
make
can do.
sense?
That's really, you can't really do
It
much
gets,
better,
the
unfortunately.
spring gets very
That's
tricky.
exactly what happens in my house, because the back of my house is totally in shade in the spring, and there'll be nothing in the front, and there'll be 20
Right.
inches the back.
Yeah. Yep.
In the military, we'd go out and measure 20 or 30 places and we'd average them all together.
Okay.
That's what it would be.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Usually,
So, liquid water equivalent of new snowfall. So, we made some, I made some snow. So let me go get the snow. If you all remove your funnels from your rain gauges. Right, yeah, because you know, it depends on how much snow there is.
Yeah, you might be hot.
Squish it around. If you need more hot water, let me know.
Pretty warm. There's a water.
And
Sometimes I put like a couple tubes of boiling water
Yeah.
if there was a lot of snow.
It doesn't-
Yeah,
it's not
that's-
dull, does it?
that's where
Because
I
I'm
like,
impatient.
that's where I like this. I just pour it in there and,
So you just use microwave yours?
That's what I would do, I just microwave.
Yeah,
This.
and you don't have
Put
to
it
worry
in the
about the
new version.
subtract.
yeah. You
You
need
don't
a
have to
little bit
subtract
more
anything.
water.
You're doing it fine.
No, I get it.
You still have to melt it.
There you go.
Not gonna be.
If you microwave,
Yeah,
you
you
don't
know,
have to
this
subtract
increases
Right.
the heat.
Yeah.
So whatever's in here,
Just try it both
I'm gonna
ways,
measure it.
whichever you're more
So,
comfortable
okay,
with.
so I weighed the snow that's in the two
You know, I will
buckets, subtract
say,
away
like, this part is the scariest part.
Really
So
hard
it's
to
like-
do.
Oh,
it's
was
like-
it anywhere there in your backyard?
Okay, all
I
right.
always have to.
grams of snow divided by 201.
Oh,
equals
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our snow gets,
Western part.
it's cheddar, it has been
Yeah.
on the bottom, and so we.
Actually,
always
I told you
have
that.
to-
Every
I've done it
season
past
I
the
weigh
dog,
it.
yeah, little bit.
Then what do you
Usually
do?
they're 54 grams.
Put it back in there?
So I took the measurement.
Then
But I
you just
have
add
one
this
that's
amount to the other
450.
amount you had, yep.
So
Dana's over there to help us with the
what
math.
is
I'm away from that.
Maybe
Plus
she wants to
0.3,
tutor Murray Smith.
which equals mathematician.
I basically.
3, 4, 5, there's right, 45 acres.
but you know, still some
Okay, so everybody's melted?
it's,
No,
No, no, okay, okay. You want a little bit more warm water, Lynn?
We probably need a little.
You don't get an error that way, you have to
Oh.
look at it flat.
When you do that part,
Otherwise,
weighing it
it
takes
will
a while.
look off.
That's why we pull it down.
Yep, so once you've melted it, then you
Yeah,
put
you round
the,
down.
That is
Oh,
true,
so
that
when they-
instead of subtracting,
The bottom
you
of
divide
it
it,
is just
so
round
math
down.
is more complicated.
That's a gutter that he
You put the spout back on top of your inner tube,
Yeah, usually.
and then you pour it back in.
I do it mentally, but I.
Go ahead, subtract it
Then I
first.
put it in the calculator to make sure I didn't see that.
If you have quite a bit, it might go over an inch. Woo!
0.34?
He's good. What assistant? How's Jerry doing here?
Oh, really?
never felt. And they don't want you to. Because the information.
0.96.
There you go.
I'll find in this, when I'm in my range, there could be a
So
substantial
you measure that
amount
amount,
stuck on the side, right? So I'm
and
always
then
like,
you
Well,
empty it.
yeah.
And
everybody
out the other
I
end.
take it straight.
oh, yeah, I'm like, they're going, I'm used to it, I've even done this. Get out of there. I do, I said when I take it, it's all in there, I'm like,
When I was in graduate school,
I need a more,
teaching
yeah.
assistant.
Oh, I do, I'm like, I use my finger.
Oh, I know, I got my 20.
I had
I do my finger, I do the same thing about the
Push
gift
it in
count.
there. See, that's
I
why
thought I was
there's
the only
an
one doing
error.
that.
That's why there's an error between the data.
Yeah.
calculator for anything that I can afford it.
It's amazing how much
Most
you
of
have
the students
the
have.
sides of it though.
And so I would say.
But did everybody figure that out?
Chemistry.
Any
process
questions
is
on
really
that?
simple. It's just
Yeah, it's almost.
That's how we figure out the liquid water equivalent. Or you can go to the head of the class, and if you have a kitchen scale, try Andy's method. Any
Watch the
questions?
video on the Cocoa Ross thing.
Yeah, but that, oh yeah, I love their
Well,
videos.
your
They're great.
ratio thing here, this is the way I've done it for years.
Yeah,
I
we're
made a
getting to that.
graph and it's not linear at all.
Right,
It's very non-linear. I have a graph and then I just measure the mean temperature and the snow depth and then just look at my graph and convert it.
right, because why is that, it's not going beyond 0 degrees, why? Because then it starts going back down. The
Oh,
the
why?
colder it gets, then the less snow you
It's-
have,
yeah.
because
It's,
the snowflakes get so small.
but anyway, that's the way I've done it for years. Just a minute.
So the other way to measure the snow is to actually measure the snow depth core. Now this is something that's optional. I didn't do it last winter, I always wanted to, but I think this year I'm gonna set alerts for myself like every other week. Get the snow depth core liquid measurement. And especially up where we are, because we have so much snow that just sits there, and it is so helpful for the hydrologists. So again, the best idea is to go on the Cocoa Ross webpage and watch their videos, because like out where we live, when we were dealing with 2 to 3 feet of snow, I can't just put this here, and I'm not gonna be able to dig down and be able to pull out 3 feet of snow. So I'm actually going to have to go out and dig an area down into the ground. And let's say now I'm down into the ground, and now this is my 3 feet of snow. So now I'm gonna just take 1 can, with my handy dandy spatula, 1 can, shove the spatula under there, pull that up and out, empty that snow into my handy dandy Tupperware container. Then I can go down and get the next can of snow and empty that in there as well, take it back into the house, melt it all, whatever method you want to use for melting it, and then measure it. And then record that on the observation.
Is there a place for that?
Yes, there is.
That's the total snow water equivalent.
The total snow depth water equivalent, yeah.
So just do that like every couple of weeks or something.
Every couple of weeks, yeah, that's not necessary for every day, because that amount doesn't change that much. Now, let's say we have a good dump, and you get 2 feet of snow. Think back to December of last year, where we had just a couple of inches and boom. So, depending on what's going on, then you can vary that. For myself, I'm just gonna try and do it consistently every 2 weeks, because as you said, Frank, as the season goes on and that snow continues to settle, that's gonna be changing a lot, and there may be some melting going on under there as we get into the
Ice
spring.
layers and.
Yeah, the ice layer, so.
Avalanche layers.
Oh,
That's what causes avalanches.
yes, the different consistencies. So, for snowfall, we already talked about measuring as soon after it falls to take additional measurements, and then finding a level place. The notes from Coca Ross say just to slide the ruler. Oh, I didn't bring our actual ruler. So if you have a 1-foot ruler and you're taking your snowfall measurements, and your ruler is in eighths, okay, on the back of your laminated sheet, I broke down what eighths are into tenths for you, for those of you that are not math teachers, and it's early in the morning, so you can quickly figure out.
So can't you use that one though? Aren't you supposed to use that one to measure it?
You can use this for your snowfall.
Right.
I personally I have a 10th ruler.
That's a metal.
Now, the difference between a ruler and a rule,
It's usually a ruler and a scale.
okay,
On one side it is British.
Machinists use scales, carpenters use rulers.
I can send
Okay,
you
send me
one.
a link.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, carpenters use yardsticks.
It's actually a meter stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, why are
I'm too.
Roll it off the bottom.
So,
You get a very
That's a
precise
very-
measurement.
some rulers,
and you're like,
the very nice Pagosa weather rulers that we got, it's actually has a couple of tenths before the first mark shows up. So you have to subtract that. So, yeah, I was really disappointed because they're very nice rulers, but
Sand it down.
that's not very scientific, so.
And the nice metal.
Sanding it down is definitely scientific.
Steak that I got off the official website, the markings were
It's like a
off for
Dremel.
a couple of seasons.
Oh, no.
Because going down
Oh,
through crusty snow.
Yeah,
um,
rubbed them off.
So
They have on the Coco, whatever the Coco Ross site is, there's like a metal one.
That's
that you
what I
can buy
have.
that
And
has,
the
yeah.
markings
Yeah,
come off.
but the gradations rub off, so I have to use a Sharpie to redo them.
No,
Also
just take-
scientific.
I'll just take my jigsaw and cut off the bottom. Make it easy.
Okay, we've covered everything under section 4. Section 5 is liquid water equivalent. So, one little thing that they suggest and have any of you gone out in the morning and found that your 4-inch rain gauge is overflowing with
Oh, yeah.
snow?
Oh, no, snow with rain.
Rain.
Yeah.
One time this year,
Yeah?
Oh,
How
wow.
fun.
it was
Well,
1.15 inches.
Oh, so yeah, it filled this and then you had a
And
little
then
bit
it
of.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
we've had
yeah,
that.
yeah,
We've had
yeah,
that.
yeah. So, that's always good fun. So, this winter you may find a big floop of snow.
Picture behind
Wow.
That's
I'm
a
sorry?
different picture.
Picture behind you.
Snow fluke.
Oh, yes.
That's a fluke.
Sample A.
That's a fluke.
It's a fluke.
There's a floop of snow.
Wow.
So you just want to take your spatula again and just push the floop down into the gauge to make sure that you don't lose any of your precious snow.
What if it won't fit?
What is
It
this?
will,
Such a
it
very
will
big
be,
fish.
well, you'll be able to smoosh it down.
Double fluke.
But,
Yeah.
but so, like in that case, the fluke goes like.
Yeah, that one goes over, so would you get that too?
You
Yeah.
probably-
What I
have to
would
count that.
do is anything that is over the rain gauge itself here, I would
Slice it.
slice it
Yeah,
and then,
that's what I usually try to do.
This is
Push.
1 foot, isn't it? Looks like it's 12 inches.
you know,
Use your yardstick, man.
I think it's like 11.
Your measuring device.
No, you're right, it's a foot.
Yeah, it looks like a foot.
Yeah, exactly.
That's 9 inches.
Yeah, so, I think we went over these different methods.
Like a foot.
Well, no, if you flip it, she said just cut the sides off.
Yeah, you know, it really
But
is an
take
art.
a picture of
As you can tell, it's not gonna be precise
and send to
sometimes.
us. We want to see your floop of snow for those of you that live out where it gets
And
good.
then back to the situation that Sean measured earlier, when all of your snow is
Oh, yeah.
here on this outside, how do you deal with that?
So,
Could happen.
thank you for that lead in, Andy. I think we've covered liquid water equivalent, and then we've gone over snow depth. There's all these notes here for you to review. But now we're gonna get into, scenarios. So it's been nice all night long, the wind hasn't been blowing at all, the snow has been falling nicely, and you let the dog out, and the dog runs over your snowboard.
Killed it.
Sue goes out and she's shoveling, and she shovels snow up on top of your snowboard. Or that nasty wind. The wind usually is the culprit. The wind comes along and you've just got snow all up and down the side of your can, and you don't have any snow in there. But now you've got snow out on your snowboard. Okay? So this comes into where we start estimating things. And this, you just put it all in the remarks. Estimated snowfall due to the dog. Estimated liquid or liquid water equivalent due to the wind. Whatever the case may be, it happens. It's not going to be perfect. So on your laminated sheet here, on the back at the bottom is snow water equivalent based on temperature. Okay, so in this particular scenario, the dog has messed up your snowboard. So you have no idea what your snowfall is. So you go grab your rain gauge and you figure out what your liquid is. And now you can mathematically, you know that for the most part during the night, your temperatures were at about 27 average. And this, you'll notice the temperatures overlap, like you have at 27, it could be a 10-to-1 or 12-to-1 ratio. And that all has to do with how snow forms. We have these big, beautiful dendritic flakes that will form if you have good upward vertical velocity in the clouds, if you have cold air advection coming in. But if there's too much wind up in the clouds, then that tears all that snow apart. And so you get smaller and smaller flakes falling. And so these things, it varies a lot. So temperature is just one of the things that we can take into account as to figure out how much snowfall we have. Again, you're estimating, you're going to make a note on it in remarks. The other thing, as Sean already mentioned earlier too, is estimating what your snowfall was, and it melts on you. You're at work during the day. You know that it snowed in the morning, so you, again, can take your liquid and estimate what your snowfall was. Okay, so in this particular case, you end up with 2 tenths of liquid, and you know that your temperature was at 27. So that would be a 10-to-1 ratio, so that you know that you had 2 inches of snow. Does that make sense? Okay.
And you just make the remark that it is estimated for those reasons.
And then you can go backwards the other way. You can figure out what your liquid was when that wind is just pounding against the can. So you haven't gotten anything in the can, but you've got out on your board, you can take a snowfall measurement. So you go back in and you have 1 inch of snow on your board, and it was much colder, let's say 15 degrees, and so then your factor then is 0.06, so you're going to divide that 1 inch of snow by 0.06. And you need a calculator. Okay.
That's a good breakdown.
No, it's
Sorry.
Excel spreadsheet.
Supposed to pick easy, even.
Yeah, I know.
Fill in
So
the blank on the Excel spreadsheet.
I measured it on the board.
it would be 0.12. So your liquid then would be 0.12. So those are just some different things that are going to happen. So, any questions on that?
And I can tell you, as you know, we've looked at this data for many, many years, not just here, but in Alaska and everything. And as meteorologists, we'll look at a whole bunch of data, and we just kind of ignore the top 10%, the lowest 10%. We kind of, You know, as an example, right now, if you look at ambient, somebody over in the Lake Village area has clearly just got their sensor in their house and they're just watching the temperature in their house. So, you know, I know when I looked at weather data last night and everybody's in the upper 40s or low 50s and there's one weather data that says 68, boom, it's out. You know, so we see that, you know, too. This is the same way. And sometimes we're the ones that are off quite a bit. And don't worry about that. You know, something is better than nothing, and we can toss out those, what we think are kind of erroneous. And sometimes now that we have communications with you guys, we might just ask, you know, did you guys have a heavy squall? Did the sun come out and, you know, cook it all away? You know, what's the deal? Why is yours, you know, so much different than your neighbors?
I had a call from the National Weather Service in Grand Junction once. They said, you know, we noticed that you reported 1.7 inches of rain and everybody else only had 0.17. Do you think you might have had an error in your measurement?
A decimal error, yeah. That's how
Well, I probably, you know, was stumbling back to the house and entered it on my phone and screwed up, you know? And I've got an independent measurement from the Davis, and so I know it's not 1.7.
It happens. We had somebody reporting for the longest time, their snow measurements were way higher than anybody else. And I asked them specifically, are you sure you're not reporting centimeters? Because I couldn't figure out anything else. It didn't make sense.
So I think the last thing on the notes, the Coco Ross notes, is significant weather reports. So significant weather during the winter is going to be if you're getting more than an inch an hour. Then that's the sort of thing that you want to go ahead and send a special weather report. Now, how many people use the Coco Ross app on your phones, on smartphones?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Yeah,
It's pretty quick and easy.
Good for you, Frank, but I prefer the app. I like it.
I don't have a phone.
Sweet.
That sounds
Smoke
really
signals
nice.
for you?
Email. You wanna talk to me,
Cool.
email me.
All right, man.
Awesome, awesome. So you can't send the significant weather report on the app. You have to get on your computer, your desktop, your laptop, and go to the actual webpage, or on the smartphone to the webpage, but that gets pretty hard to drift around in there. So the reason for that is if you're getting more than an inch an hour, especially you guys up there on Highway 160, going up to Wolf Creek, you got an inch at 10 o'clock in the morning, you got another inch at 10:30, you go in and you make that significant weather report, that immediately goes to places. Grand Junction will pick up on that right away. They're gonna be putting out.
You'll notify CDOT.
That's a
Warnings,
separate,
yeah,
that's
that's
a
what I
separate
was
deal
gonna
on there,
say.
and it's at the bottom, or it's a significant thing is somewhere different.
I think it's over on the left-hand side menu.
Okay.
Yeah, under where your observations are. Yeah, so Department of Transportation is going to get notified. There's different agencies that will get that information, and that's from your backyard. That's kind of cool. So, and the same thing goes for hail. We very, very, very rarely get what we would consider a significant hail here. So, how was the biggest hail you ever saw in Texas?
Texas.
Well,
This
you mean the one when we
Easily.
had to replace our
We've
roof?
This
Yeah, we've
size.
seen softball.
Yeah.
Wasn't that big, but
Yeah,
it was.
so
Oh, yeah,
we
well,
just, you
Seen
know,
grapefruit.
Yeah, here standard is, you know, pea size. Now, the interesting thing here is, if that cell park's over the top of you with pea-size hail, you could get like 6 to 8 inches of hail on the ground, which is a temporary problem for everybody, but rarely big hail here.
Okay, that brings up a good question, because a lot of times snowstorms here start with hail.
Or
Okay,
snow pellets.
Or gravel.
Yes.
right, okay,
Okay,
so,
and it's not really snow, but it's
and it's not hail.
semi-frozen.
Right, so it's
It's
more
slushy.
gravel, yeah, it's gravel, and it's just considered snowfall. The process that makes hail and the process that makes gravel are different. Gravel starts as flakes of snow, and because of the upward,
It's smishy hail-like.
Yeah.
Smishy
Yeah.
balls. Okay.
They're very
Yeah.
much like
Chili.
little styrofoam balls,
Makes sense.
imagine
Yeah.
styrofoam balls.
so
Okay, yeah.
the upward vertical velocities in the cloud just smush them all together, and then they come out that way. So you're looking at an unstable
So you just count that as snow.
process.
Yeah,
The
so
snow.
technically, we looked at liquid, freezing, and frozen. That's it, those were our three categories. So either, rain or drizzle, or freezing rain or drizzle,
Yeah.
or basically everything else was frozen.
So
You see a
hail,
couple of these cells that came in last month at our house, they started out as hail,
Yeah.
and then they went to rain.
Yeah.
But I
Sure.
mean, there'd be that much hail on our deck.
Yeah,
how does hail start?
that's cool.
Up in the cloud, what is hail? It is a super cooled liquid particle. So it starts as a liquid, and then there are massive upward vertical velocities that send it from 8,000 feet up to 35,000 feet in areas in
Well,
Texas up
that's
to
just real common
70,000.
with the elevation we are.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So-
that hail area can be very, very confined. It might only be a half to a
Well, we get
1
that.
square mile area, and you move one way or the other, and
It
there's
can
no
be in the
hail.
front yard and not in the backyard.
Yes, yes.
So it's a good report, but here it's not significant like it was in other areas of the country, okay? So that's basically what we had to share with you tonight. This is our first annual potluck Coco Ross get-together. So I hope you all enjoyed it and that you learned something. Did anybody have any other questions?
If we do need help figuring out where to put that board, can you help us figure that? Like, we
Sure.
have no clue, I mean, like, the idea where I thought is probably, that probably won't work now, and so I'm like, you put it, I don't know, we'll just have to, you've been there, but we'll have to figure that out before it starts snowing. Right?
Every morning.
Yeah, we can talk, we can figure
yeah,
it out,
yeah,
where to put it, that'd be best.
I know.
You know?
Hiking down those steps and